Psalm 141 verse 7. Hairs and heads. Attend to my supplication, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are stronger than I. Psalm 141 verse 7, Douay Rheims. In the depths of the cave while David was in hiding, only that darkness within seemed to shield him from the rage of King Saul, who was seeking his life. But we saw in the previous passage that he came to the heights of charity, loving God for his own sake, desiring him above even salvation from his enemies. It is now that his will is completely aligned with that of the Lord that he now brings forward his supplication, for it arises not simply out of fear of his persecutors or of a sense of self-preservation, but rather out of a heart full of confidence that God's will be done in him, and that will cannot be but for his good. The first portion of this passage describes the humility of both his physical situation, but also of his soul. He is brought very low, which in St. Augustine's version of the Old Latin and the Vulgate is quia humiliatus sum nimis. The word nimis is an adverb which can mean exceedingly or too much, and thus the psalmist pours out his prayer in the sight of God, hoping only in God and his salvation, as he has nothing of himself to hope in. St. Augustine sees this as a humility both in the eyes of his persecutors, but also in the eyes of God, as it is a humility in confession. Quote, "Give heed unto my prayer, for much have I been humbled by persecutors, humbled in confession. He humbles himself out of the sight of man, he is humbled by enemies in their sight. Therefore is he lifted up by him both visibly and invisibly. Invisibly are the martyrs already lifted up, visibly shall they be lifted up, when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption in the resurrection of the dead, when this very part of him, against which alone her persecutors could rage, shall be renewed. Fear not them that kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. And what perishes, what kill they? Is even this permitted them, that what they kill should perish? It shall not perish. Hear the promise of the Lord himself. Verily I say unto you, there shall not a hair of your head perish. Why then are you anxious about the rest of your members, when you shall not lose even a hair?" St. Augustine, Expositions on the Psalms, 141:13. St. Augustine's mention of the martyrs who have been exalted invisibly provides the framing for our Lord's promise about not a hair of one's head being harmed, which would seem to be invalidated by the experience of the martyrs. After all, since much more than a hair of their heads was harmed in their persecutions and martyrdoms, how could this promise be said to be fulfilled? The psalmist will answer this question in the next clause of this passage, which completes the thought of the first. Initially, he spoke of his humiliation in both body and soul, and now describes the cause of this, which is his persecutors who are stronger than I. The Latin confortate sunt, which is they are strengthened, they are stronger, directly contrasts with humiliatus sum nimis from the opening clause, which is I am brought very low. In the darkness of the cave he has been brought to extremities, while his enemies seem to be exalted, still walking in the light of the sun. The promise that not a hair of your head will be harmed thus seems a far-off promise, when his enemies press in on all sides, and there seems no hope of escape. St. Bellarmine notes that the prophetic nature of this passage brings itself to bear in that, quote, "However true this may have been of David lurking in a cave while his enemy, Saul, was at the head of a powerful army, it is more literally true of Christ, who could truly say, I am brought very low, because he humbled himself, becoming obedient unto death, even to the death of the cross. He was also brought very low, when he, that had the right of sitting on the cherubim, hung between two robbers. Truly, also, were his enemies stronger than him when their hour came, and power was given to darkness, so as to appear, for a while, to eclipse the sun of justice itself." St. Robert Bellarmine, A Commentary on the Book of the Psalms, 141:6. And since what is true of the head can also be applied to the body, what David speaks of himself he actually speaks of Christ, and since he speaks of Christ prophetically, he also speaks of Christ's body, the Holy Catholic Church. The historical and literal significance of this passage is thus the ground upon which the spiritual understanding is built. And St. Augustine describes this in that as the martyrs were brought very low in humility to be raised into glory because of their testimony, even though to the eyes of men they seem to have perished, so too our deliverance is not primarily from the hands of men. Quote, "Deliver me from them that persecute me. From whom do you think that he prays to be delivered? From men who persecuted him? Is it so? Are merely men our enemies? We have other enemies, invisible, who persecute us in another way. Man persecutes that he may slay the body, another persecutes that he ensnare the soul. And therefore, by means of his vessels, for of him is said, he worketh in the children of disobedience, by his vessels, that is, men in whom he worketh, he dealeth persecution of the body, that inwardly he may effect the ruin of the soul. For if, though the body fall, the soul stand upright, the snare is broken, and we are delivered. St. Augustine, Expositions on the Psalms, 141:14. To be delivered from the persecutors is thus not primarily about the safety of the body, or of the literal hairs of the head in this life. For even if we are to escape from fire or sword or other persecutions, eventually the body will succumb to disease or old age or any number of other causes of death, bringing the entire body, including the hairs of the head, into ruin and dust. Our Lord's words are thus in light of the hope of the resurrection, in which the body will be brought into the glory of incorruption, in union with the soul that partakes of the beatific vision. It is thus by a soul that is united in charity with our Lord, and has escaped the corruption of this world, that the body is preserved from corruption and ruin, rising again to new life. The psalmist anticipates this consummation of all things, and pleads for the deliverance of his soul from the temptations and vices of this world, that he might stand upright in soul, as St. Augustine describes, and escape from the snare laid for him by the devil, fulfilling St. Paul's words, quote, "Now the end of the commandment is charity, from a pure heart, and a good conscience, and an unfeigned faith." 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, Douay Reims. St. Augustine goes on to describe how our battle is not against men, but against the demons and sin and the temptations and allurements of this world. All these forces use the threats against the body, and the allurements of that same flesh, to ensnare the soul and thus lead both body and soul into eternal destruction. While we are in this world in the flesh, we must not love the world, but instead cling to the one who will deliver us, setting our minds and hearts above this world and its terrors and enticements. Quote, "But though we walk in the flesh, yet we do not war after the flesh, for our conversation is in heaven. The righteous dwelleth here in the flesh, but in heart he is with God. And he is called the world if there is no ground for saying to him, Lift up your heart. But if there be ground for it, then let him dwell aloft. For ye are dead, saith the apostle, and your life is hid with Christ in God. But they whose life is here, that is, whose longing and love cling to this, here have their use, here are entangled, well are called indwellers of the world. Well too are they who dwell in the world, called the world. Just as well are they called the house, who dwell in the house. Two worlds then are there. The world was made by him, and the world knew him not. Behold the world made by the Lord. Behold the world which knew not the Lord. Praise thou the building, and love the builder, and love not to dwell in the building, but dwell in the builder. St. Augustine, Expositions on the Psalms, 141:15. Attend to my supplication, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are stronger than I. Psalm 141, verse 7, Douay Reims.